Hi there. Most recently, I got to speak with Sri Chellappa, not only the co-founder and CEO of Engagedly, a very impressive HR technology, but Sri brings not only 30 years of experience in leading technology teams, but he's also a published author, a musician, a producer, a filmmaker, and so much more. He brings creativity and a leadership philosophy to the workplace that is so refreshing and inspiring. And if you haven't picked up his most recent book, Into the Blue, it's all about Ikigai philosophy and me bringing that into the workplace to create a more meaningful and purposeful workplace. So I hope you enjoy the conversation and get some really good insights out of it. And let me know what you think. Sri, thank you for joining. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Sri, you and I actually met at SaaS Open earlier this year. We were both speaking at the People and Finance stage, and you spoke about hiring for attributes, which was really inspiring to me. And I actually brought that philosophy into this ditching conventional management culture and creating an all-in culture series that I created. So really appreciative of the insight that I learned from you at that event as well. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here and excited to dig in.
Yeah, thanks, Marnie, for having me on this show.
So starting from the top, do you mind just telling me a little bit, about yourself and Engagedly and what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is pronounced Sri Chellappa. I'm the co-founder, CEO of Engagedly. We started Engagedly about 9.5 years ago, roughly. And we've been with over almost 500 customers at this point. Most of them are in the US, but there are a few global customers as well. The whole philosophy of Engagedly is really to provide a platform for organizations that are very people-centric to provide, build those highly engaged organizations, as the name Engagedly suggests. My background primarily prior to that was in consulting. I did a lot of consulting work for about 18 years prior to that. With Big Four in the past, and then I also ran one for about another 9 years as a senior vice president and head of client services and all that. And one of the things that I really gravitated towards was trying to figure out how do we make organizations a little bit more purposeful, because I noticed the gap in that in many of these places I was working with. Many of our clients, places where we had projects going, I just didn't feel like all those places really focused a lot around making sure that people were properly aligned to their own aspirations, their skill sets, their desires. And without that, you're not getting the best out of people. And that was a primary motivation about starting Engagedly. And I also wrote a book about it called Into the Blue, which is really about aligning those things and making sure you get the best out of people.
Yeah, Into the Blue. So if you haven't looked it up, look it up. Definitely, yes, check it out. Yes, I'm so glad you brought that. Thank you. And, you do write a lot of great content. You have a lot of videos that you produce out on LinkedIn too, and about intentional culture and being able to tie it directly into, not just a feel-good notion, but performance,
Yes.
And so was there a moment that you actually decided that ignited kind of a sense of passion for you? What type of moment did you have that said, this is what I want to do?
That's a good question. I don't know if it was a moment per se. I think it was probably more self-reflection over the years of what made me happy and excited about work. And I'll tell you the story. Back in, probably giving my age away, but right before 9/11 happened, I was not very happy with my work. And it's nothing to do with the company or the culture. I just didn't enjoy it as much anymore, And then 9/11 happened. That was like a wake-up call for me personally. And I realized, I could have been in that tower. And that could have been the end of it. So you never know when something might happen. And the question that I asked is, am I living the best version of myself? And that really led me to explore different areas. And I started what I realized is I like to create things. I don't like to do just operational work. And I ended up I still stayed in the job, but I started exploring some creative options. I started writing a lot. I wrote over the period of the last many years. I've written 2 books, obviously now, but also I've written 7 movie scripts. I've written 8 songs, and I've produced 7 feature films and documentaries, and I've done a lot of those things, right? But it's not just about the art side of things, building stuff, creative stuff, right? So then I realized my passion would really be in working for startups, where we are actively building stuff and not just maintaining the operations of a successful business. So I like those challenges, and that's what really led me to do the startup previously, where we scaled a company in IT services, and then got out of that and did Engagedly, and that was really the philosophy that embodied me. And I said, that's how everybody should live, and doesn't mean everybody needs to be creative and take risks like I did, but whatever it drives them forward, right? Some people really like customer-facing roles. Some people really like roles where they're left alone to do things they want to do, right? Some people like an interactive environment. Some people like more creative work in the environment. Some people like more, analytical work in the environment. And I think it's important for the managers and the leaders to understand that level. And it's at the personal level that that, not just because somebody has a job title of a marketing analyst or a job title of HR analyst. Because as you know, an HR analyst can mean many things. You can be an HR analyst who does a lot of number crunching, but you can be an HR analyst who does a lot of culture building, right? So there are many different aspects of the same role, but so it comes down to the individual, what they excel at, and because they really truly find it interesting. And I think that's the culture I started embodying in all my work, whether I was, in my last organization, and then with Engagedly, I emphasize understanding the people at the core of what drives them, what gets them up in the morning on a Monday morning to go to work. And then when you get that right alignment, you notice that we get the best out of people. You can get a lot more done with a fewer people, because you are giving them a good reason to come to work. You are a good reason to align to your culture. And that doesn't cost a lot of money. It's really about understanding and having those conversations. So that was really a movement that really was more inside out versus me observing and coming up with some insight from looking at other leaders, I guess.
Yeah, no, and I love that, because what I'm hearing is it started with reflection of what do I want out of what I do on a daily basis, whether it's outside work or inside work, and then how do I create that kind of environment for my workplace, and so I think that's really inspiring, and a lot of people don't really start out that way of like, I'm spending a lot of time in the work that I do. And so that's make sure that we're all harnessing our strengths. And I just love that. It is with the HR analyst, it's like, I'm more on the culture, side, but there's a lot of people I've done the compliance and you name it, but it's finding what really motivates people, which is super impactful.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So speaking of impactful, I was looking through your videos the other day, and there was a statement that you said that, culture doesn't show up because you showed a positive behavior once. Like, you have to continue showing that positive behavior to really have impact on a culture. So that was a really good example of behavior shifting in an organization. But can you share a moment, whether it's with your own businesses or with one of your clients, that you've seen culture actually transform an organization?
Well, transforming cultures are hard, to be honest, and that requires a real change. It's like, if somebody hasn't ever gone to the gym, and then you ask that person to, hey, you need to get fit, and they'll talk about wanting to get fit, wanting to stay healthy, and they might go to the gym once, and then they might go to the gym again a week later, and then a month later, and then they stop again, and they revert back. It's a reversion to the mean, essentially, right? That's the mean, and they keep reverting to the mean. So changing a culture is like moving a boulder uphill, and you have to be constantly doing that, because the moment you let go, the boulder is going to roll down. right?
Yes.
And I think that's so changing a culture. I have not necessarily seen culture shift to be positive personally. I've seen it gone negative in many ways. In some, so in to answer your question, I'm going to answer that there were times where I noticed when some of the main leaders who were building that culture. One of the organizations I worked with, after the original founders and the core and the people who built the company, right, left over time, the culture has completely changed over there. And then you started seeing people being there just for a paycheck, right? They had an external CEO, external leadership, all the people who came in. The culture was not the same that the original founding culture was, which was really about, you could have conversations, open conversations, you can debate openly. It was more about how do I protect my job going forward over there. And that ultimately that reflected, in one of the organizations and I can't name obviously these companies, but one of them ended up losing 30-40% of the revenue over the course of few years and has not recovered. And I think that's fundamentally, could have been the market potentially, but I think a big attribute of that is culture, because you notice that some of the other competitors have not had the same negative results. They may have not grown as fast as they used to, but you can see the change in culture can make that impact. So that's what I've seen. So a lot of companies have that. The original founder culture leaves, and then the new company culture changes dramatically. And you've seen that. Being in Silicon Valley, you've seen some of when the founders leave, and then the investors bring in an external CEO. The entire culture changes. Then you see massive turnover. You have new leadership, new people, and the good ones know how to preserve that original founder culture. And I think that happened with Apple, right? We know that. And then Steve Jobs came back and rebuilt that culture, right? So that's an example of and I worry about that with many organizations that we work with, where there's this tendency for investors to come in and replace a CEO, replace a leadership, and somehow want to see magical results, instead of figuring out what the true problem might be or how do you scale without having to make those big changes. Because when you make those changes, it's not about changing the market dynamics, you're changing fundamentally the culture of the organization. Positive changes to a culture are much, much harder, to be honest, than it's much easier to change the culture from a positive culture to a negative culture.
And yes, it is so true. And I've seen it happen so often, particularly in the startup world, of you have a culture that's very much founder centric, because they're the ones who built the organization and they're buying into that founder vision. But then as the company scales, maybe gets acquired or does the acquiring and whatnot, things tend to get rather convoluted. So if these companies, as they're scaling and moving forward and getting new investors, are taking their eye off the ball and forgetting what that kind of special sauce was to begin with, and
Yes.
how to grow and scale that alongside, they really put themselves at risk. So I like what you're saying of it's really hard to do more positive momentum, but even more importantly is how do you keep what made the origins of that company special as
Yes.
they grow.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so good. And so, looking into the next 5 years, you had mentioned, with the, economic environment, the technology environment, you name it. What's one change that you'd like to see or trend that you even see in company culture over the next 5 years?
I talk about this a lot. I fundamentally believe we need to move as a society, if you will, not just at the company level, but a society into eventually, I don't know when we'll get there, but some companies are already there. We are seeing more and more of that to begin with, is this agency model where people have agency in their careers, agency in their role. And what that means, and it can mean multiple things, but I think what that means is you are there out of your own volition. You're not just there to get a paycheck and be told what to do. Right, so you're there out of your own volition because you're looking at it as a project that you want to do some good work over there, and get obviously compensated for it, and enjoy that process. And then it also means that you may not be there permanently. There is no such thing as permanence as we know. And I talk about that in one of my things. Is the whole Buddhist philosophy is about everything is temporary, right? And you just need to enjoy that journey. So I think if you have agency, you can have that mindset that I am here to serve a certain role, and out of my own volition, and I have agency in my role, agency in my work I want to do. And if you feel like you don't get that much anymore, I mean, obviously there are things you will do that you may not want to do that have that's part of the role. But if you see more and more of that, at that point you can decide to just walk away and go to a different role. And that's true for across all levels. I'm not just talking about lower level employees. Even as a manager or an executive, or some companies bring in a CEO specifically for a transformation, and then the CEO leaves after 4 or 5 years. That happens all the time. They bring in a transformational CEO or a transformation leader, but they know that this is for a project, for agency. So if that is true for the leadership, it should be true for people as well. People are not need to be treated differently. Hey, you are here for 20 years, but I decide when you leave. Right? I decide that, we need to answer to the Wall Street, and our stock price is down, so now I'm going to lay off 20% of my workforce. You're part of that 20%, right?
Right.
And the issue is, I take issue with that. I'm not saying you don't need to cut costs. Obviously, you do need to cut costs when you do that. But I think the onus then becomes also on the employee to say, okay, you know what? Is this the role I want? Do I have agency in my work? Is this the company I want? Is it the culture I want to be in? And make that call. And I think as a society, it'll take some time to get there, but I think we are seeing more and more of that, especially with the whole rise of freelance and fractional roles, like the one you do, Marnie, as well, gives you that agency. So even if you go somewhere on a fractional basis, you have agency in there and you do that work. And I think that can happen. That'll happen more and more. A percentage of the workforce that isn't that kind of fractional or part-time, or maybe for a limited amount of time but full-time, all those combinations, if you will, we'll see more and more of that, because they are now taking control of their own careers and their work. So I would like to see acceptance of that more and more at the management level too, because it's not true. You can't just make it true only for yourself as a CEO or a chief whatever officer. You have to look at it that's true for other people as well. And accept that and respect that.
Yeah, here. It really is one of those, and I've seen visionary CEOs be able to say, yes, I want people to grow, even if it's out of our organization, right? But there's also this aspect of, what are we telling our people leaders as well? Are we tracking metrics of, what is the mobility of your team, whether it's to another area of the business or if it's, outside of the business? And how are we proactively having those conversations? And even with Engagedly, what is your individual development plan? And that doesn't necessarily need to be internally with your organization. So how are we growing our team? But I love how you put agency on that. I feel like that is a cultural viewpoint of an organization.
Yes. I think so. One of the without overtly being touting our product, but there is a tool within our product that we build specifically for that. It's called aspirations. So where employees can express their aspiration, whether they like the current role or they want to grow out of this current role, and what new role they would like to have, what type of work they would like to have, and express that. And are they happy with the department they're in? All those different questions, and it's customizable. So every company can decide how to ask those questions. But if you start doing that more and more companies, whether you do it using our tool or you use some survey tool or Google or Google Forms or whatever you use, it doesn't really matter. The point is, if you do that as a culture, you are expressing, you're announcing to the world or to your teams that we care about how you feel in your role, and we care about what you really aspire to do. Just that act alone can go a long way in building that culture of we listen to our people. But then obviously you need to do something about it. So you can't just listen to it and then discard it in the trash pile. You have to take that into consideration and then say, you know what, this role that you're asking for doesn't exist in our organization. How can I help you transition into the role maybe somewhere else, right? Maybe we only have 4 roles, four total jobs for marketing managers. When you want to be a marketing manager, I can't create a fifth one, right? So I'll help you get there, and then you can decide whether you want to continue staying here or maybe go to a different role in a different part of the organization, or help you transition out where you have these skills but build that career here. Even though the person might learn and leave, they will give their best while they're there. I think that's the thing to consider. So it is still a positive ROI from a purely organizational, perspective. It's still a positive ROI of that investment and that effort you make as a leader, because it also sends signals to other employees as well. So there is this collateral benefit that you get out of this. So I think that's an important aspect. And I've done that with some of my team members, where one of the ones wanted to really work on AI, build a lot of AI stuff. And we are not an AI company. We are an HR tech company that uses AI. Now, if you want to do completely just work only on AI and build AI models and things like that, we don't have that role today. We only can do a few things, and that person eventually transitioned out, and we still chat, and that's perfectly fine. I think that's a mindset I would encourage, that can really help make that reality.
Exactly. And a lot of times they come back or they refer other people. Like it's all about, just as you would do with customer experience, but it's employee experience is creating fans and evangelists out there in the world saying that was a good place to come from. Let's skip to rapid fire questions. What is one habit or ritual that has grounded you as a leader?
My calendar is open. So anybody in my entire organization can see what my available times are and take it. That allows everybody to know that they can, you talk about open door policy and stuff like that. Obviously, we are in a distributed environment, virtual workforce. So the open door means open calendar. Now, if they put a time on my calendar, I ask them, okay, what do you want to specifically talk about? And does it require a meeting? And if it does, I will take it. And if it not, maybe we can just resolve it over chat.
Totally. I think it's very descriptive of who you are as a leader, in very open door policy, but let's do things with intention. Okay, so what's one tool or app that you can't live without?
One tool or app? Man, we use Google. We are in the Google suite. So I think Google Chat is something we use. We are not big on Slack. we are more of a Google chat group. I would say that I'm a big WhatsApp user as well. So I would say WhatsApp is a big one, especially since we work with a lot of international people, and I have, I have family in India, so we're on WhatsApp a lot.
Absolutely, major tool if you're going to work globally. You gotta pretty much have WhatsApp to go with it. So if you had a billboard on the side of the highway, what's one piece of advice that you would put on it for leaders?
This is what I would do. It's not just for leaders, for anybody. I think the most important thing and it comes from, one of the writings from Bhagavad Gita, actually, where I would say it talks about, focus on your work and don't get caught up on the outcome. I'm translating it to really keep it simple, but it really is talking about, if you start focusing too much on the outcome of your work, you will start making mistakes, and then you get distracted from what you need to do. So do what is required, and then let the cards fall as they may.
I like that. And the path shifts, and that's okay.
Yeah, don't lose sight of what you are trying to accomplish, obviously. But if you start overtly focusing on that, then you become a different person. It's like if you start focusing too much on making money, for example, and not focusing on what actually you're doing to make money, you become a different person. It's not going to be fun anymore, You need to enjoy that work, even however hard that may be.
Brilliant. Love it. Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or advice, for other people, leaders, HR professionals out there just trying to make the world of work a little better?
Yeah, I think the one advice I would give is to really, the pillars of all organizations, and I think this is not talked about as much as I would like to see it being talked about are your line managers, first level managers, and second level managers, obviously, in some cases, depending on how big your organization is. They are the pillars of your organization. They are the ones who are carrying the boat of your culture. I, I would like for every leader and HR leaders and CEOs and other leadership as well to focus on making sure their managers are trained well, they're enabled well, they're supported, because it's a very tough role, especially new managers, because you in that role you have to deal with a lot of employees that you suddenly started managing that you never used to manage before. But there's a lot of personality that you have to work with. But you also have to manage your managers and your leaders as well. So you're kind of getting compressed from both sides, and you really need to make sure that person has the right fortitude and the skills and the mindset to do that. And if you get a bad manager or a few bad managers, your culture can completely fall apart. And I think that's the one thing I would say that we should focus on more, rather than focusing a lot more. We do a lot of focusing around leadership development, all of that, which is great. We don't focus enough on manager development.
Yes, absolutely. Cultures are made and broken on the shoulders of line managers and first level managers. So couldn't agree more. As far as, that advice and everything, if you're interested in learning more about Sri and Engagedly or Into the Blue, look him up on LinkedIn. He's definitely someone to follow. Sri, thank you so much. I really appreciate you jumping on, and hope to continue the conversation again soon.
Thank you, Marnie. It was a pleasure.